Hey guys, what's going on? This is Brad from the Ad Army, and today, as you can tell, we are going into another basic breakdown. This time we are talking about Vikemon, which will also include the GOMAMON and PlusYomon line. But today we're going to be showing off the next entry into basic breakdown, which will allow you to know, understand, and see how these cards are supposed to function, and maybe give you a way to understand the strategy. But before I get into it, as always, remember, I have one little request of you. And that is simple, and that is to go ahead, like, comment, and subscribe to the video. Remember to also turn on the notification bell to let you know when we have different uploads coming through, and allow yourself to join our army. This is the only army that you can add yourself to. So jumping straight into it, we have the Vikemon, which is going to be the main focus of the deck, but also this is more so here because Vikemon is probably the one that everyone is most familiar with. We do have PlusYomon and GOMAMON as well, so they will be a part of it as they are two branches of the same tree, PlusYomon being another evolution line for the GOMAMON line, but Vikemon being the primary and understood top end for the strategy does mean that both of these strategies do technically intertwine together, so I will be talking about both in today's video. But morely, we're going to be talking about the card that I think is the most important, which is GOMAMON. GOMAMON has been a card that has been all the way since the beginning of the game, which is in the starter decks and has been present ever since in different formats, different sets, as well as different effects that have allowed it to exist. But more importantly, it will also explain why this deck is still somewhat confusing when it comes to being completed. But both the Vikemon and PlusYomon lines are very impactful because they're very important to the game's history, at least at this current time of recording. But more importantly, they are very interesting decks that are playable, but they do have different little quirks. But like I said, the main thing we will be looking at is going to be how a lot of these cards are all related to the GOMAMON family. As there are so many GOMAMONs from different branches of different sets that were been printed, they all have different strategies that allow them to be a part of the same deck, but we will also be talking about that a little bit later on. We will be starting off with eggs, and to be honest, there's only two real choices. And yes, if you're thinking, it is a flashback to what we saw in the basic breakdown for Blue Hybrid Ice, but for good reasons, these are two of the best eggs I think you can run. Now, starting off, the first reason we have Vikemon here is that Vikemon was always intended for this deck. It was supposed to be its actual egg, and had not other blue decks taken advantage of Vikemon as well, I do think this deck would have been a little bit better at showcasing why Vikemon was made for this specific strategy, but we're only able to play one, unfortunately. But I do recommend, if you're going to try either of these strategies, that you go ahead and play one Vikemon. Additionally, Wanyamon is here because it is just generically the best blue card. This deck runs Tamers, it interacts with Tamers, and I think you have the best chance of getting draw power because this deck is lacking a bit of draw power in the deck. So I do think by running Wanyamon, you can maximize your potential of being able to draw cards, but simultaneously being able to additionally facilitate with actions with your Tamers. So that is something you have to factor in. Moving into the rookies, we'll be looking at the lineups here, but we're starting off with the best rookie for the GOMAMON archetype, or basically the Vikemon and PlusYomon line, which is the BT14 GOMAMON. BT14 GOMAMON from Blast Ace is arguably the most powerful rookie of the GOMAMON, basically species of cards, because what it does is that on the start of your main phase, you get to trash a card. You're also, for the inheritable, that when this Digimon would be deleted, you get to play a GOMAMON out from the sources, effectively allowing you to play this card infinite times as long as it is under like a level 4 or some type of combination. So as long as that stack dies and this is in it, you get to play out a GOMAMON. That is the way to go. This is basically your way to start your plays. It is a source strip, so it procs with a lot of your Tamers as well as some of your other effects. But just importantly, this is a body that floats around, like just literally allowing you to play itself back. If the stack dies, it makes your opponent have to realize that you may have that one last swing if they're not careful and eliminate your Digimon. So they could turn a threat, there's only one Digimon that could beat your board, into another threat by playing out a source, and the next thing you know, they're in trouble. But pretty much we have that as kind of our last, our main option, because this is the one I think you'd play 4 of. That's why this card is somewhat expensive for what it is, but it is very useful and it demands its price. Now, looking into the next one, we have GOMAMON X. GOMAMON X is the best and only rookie searcher in the entire lineup of GOMAMON. So you have to play this card because even though it's generic, it's very generic in that like it has a low play cost, it has a generic Digievolution condition on top. Evolving on top of GOMAMON is really good for BT14 GOMAMON because you just put this on top and now technically it's in a source. So if this GOMAMON X dies, next thing you know, you're able to play back GOMAMON. So you're not losing anything in return. But GOMAMON X's strength with its on-play and with Digivolving, you get to look for Sea Beast, Plesiosaur, and Aqua Beast, which is effectively all of the Gomamon, Plesiomon, and Vikemon line. So this is the only Omni Searcher, but is also the only Searcher. And then for its inheritable, it allows you to stun a Digimon with fewer or more Digi-Evolution sources. So this card is very important. It has the same effect as like something on the Koikakumon that we actually looked at in the last basic breakdown. But yeah, this deck has access to stunning through this card, so it is very important to play it. Now the next one we have is actually the promo Gomamon. I think this is probably the most popular Gomamon by most people's standards because it's seen the most play in a variety of decks. This is just because of its amazing inheritable to let you gain a card when a source is stripped. This, in conjunction with Hexablaumon from BT5, made this card an early staple in the deck, and I do remember that card demanding a high price even before that set was released. But pretty much this card demands its presence because it just has a really good generic effect, and getting memory back is just priceless. Moving into the next line of rookies, we have a few others. So we have the EX1 Gomamon. I have this one here because this one, in theme with some of the other cards, show that the deck is kind of focused on trashing cards and using it in a different way. So this card on play just lets you trash a source. So that's pretty much all it does. Moving into the BT2 Gomamon or BT1 Gomamon, this one's very important because on deletion, it just nets you a memory back. And this card was very important for early Digimon all the way up until I think about BT6. And the reason why was this card was just always a good way to get memory back. So if your opponent kills a stack, you get a memory back. And honestly, that was like a really good effect because you could steal turns. You could also force your opponent down. In early Digimon, it was hard because you really had to be memory efficient, and this card was just a good way to punish your opponent, and no one else could forget the old Leomon plus Gomamon combo, where you swing with Leomon, it dies, you get 2 memory, this within the source, you get a memory. It was just too good to pass up, but that's also the point of why this strategy and this Gomamon is very important for the history, but right now it's not as important, but you can still play a number of this. And finally, the last one I want to mention is the one from BT7. This one is focused more on aquatic strategies where you play it out from the sources and you draw 2. This one doesn't see as much play in Vikemon and Plesiomon now for various reasons, but this still sees play in aquatic. But I thought I'd mention it because it shows how diverse the Gomamons are in terms of their effects, because they all have pretty decent effects for what they are. Moving into substitute rookies you could use, I have Betamon here as your main substitute because it is a jammer. Giving you jamming to your stack is important, and because we don't have Bukamon at 4, so we can't really utilize it at full potential in this strategy, you could supplement that with something like Betamon. Additionally, Madoki, Betamon, and Otamamon are floodgates, so you can use them for those different purposes, and that's pretty much all I've got for the rookies. Let's look at champions, and you'll start to understand why the strategy is a little strange, but the premise of what it's probably trying to do. So we'll jump right into the champions, and we'll go about this with probably the strongest champion here, that being the BT14 Ikakumon. So BT14 Ikakumon is, the best way I can explain this is that this is Bandai trying to make up for the fact that all of the support for Gomamon has been really slow, so they need to find a way to accelerate it. So when you read it, the first effect, it strips 2 immediately for a champion. That's really good. Additionally, when attacking, and then until the end of your opponent's turn, you get to stun a Digimon with fewer or as much sources as this Digimon. So that's already really good. But it has the same effect as its inheritable. So to me, when I read this card, I look that this is Bandai's way of saying, hey, we need to accelerate how good this deck is because it's really not coherent yet. And that's not a bad thing to say, actually, for this strategy, because if you were to look at it, you would say, yeah, why isn't the support kind of line up together? It's pretty much because they've gone with the approach of making everything, every time they made a Gomamon or Ikakumon, they give them very generic effects, so they don't really have a game plan in mind. This is the first time they have a game plan in mind, and they're trying to solidify how good the strategy is, so you have to take it with a grain of salt. Moving into the next one, this is the one all the way from BT1. This is a BT1 Ikakumon. This one has, your opponent can't block this Digimon if it has no Digi-Evolution cards. This one hasn't really seen too much play, but I think this card could easily see more play in the strategy if the support changes a little bit more to give some more trashing support, so very good. And then finally we have the BT2 Ikakumon. This one is just focusing on being able to source strip, as it strips the top source of a Digimon instead of the bottom. So this one's really interesting, I think, with in conjunction with something like D-Digivolve. I think this makes the source strip really strong, but pretty much that's it for the Ikakumons. There's a few others, but I do think that they're not as viable with what the deck is becoming. So we will talk about that later. But let's get into the last champion I have as a substitute. We have once again Pale Dramon from EX7. The reason I have this one is that it effectively matches what Ikagumon can do. So it gives you trashing from 2 bottom sources. So if you really think about this, you evolve this for 2 on top of, say, promo GOMAMON. You're now going to strip 2 sources, get memory back, so it'll go to be a 1 evolution. Then if this Digimon, if your opponent has no Digimon with Digivolution sources, you're going to get jamming and blocker. The reason this is huge is that, say you have the, for instance, the BT14 GOMAMON, and this is in the sources of this Digimon. If your opponent swings for whatever reason, you can block, have it die, bring back GOMAMON, and now set that up. Additionally, if you choose to attack with this Digimon, its one attacking effect and its inheritable will be you to just trash the top of your opponent's Digi-Evolution cards. So effectively, it'll also net you a trash. So pretty much this card is very strong and allows you to take advantage of that. So that's why I have it here as our substitute. It just does enough, and it kind of matches what the Ikagumon from BT14 does, but in a different way. So it is worth playing. Now, as we look into the level 5s, you'll start to see where I think the deck is kind of solidifying itself, but it also needs some work. So the ultimates here are interesting. So we have BT1 Zudomon here. This one on play can trigger a draw 2 for you. And then when attacking, if your opponent has a Digimon with no Digi-Evolution sources, you get to gain a memory. This card was a staple in early Digimon because it was a hard play 7, but it was worth it because you get it to draw 2, which card economy was very important in early Digimon. But more importantly, this effect with the attacking was really good for a bigger Digimon that could take advantage of your opponent, like having these like very cheap rookies or having to hard play blockers. So this is an important factor for those who don't know. This Digimon actually saw a lot of play in early Digimon, and it actually saw play for a while until it kind of fell off. But it actually is still serviceable today if you could really find a way to maximize this, because it doesn't actually have bad effects at all. It actually has very good ones. So there is a room for it possibly. Now moving into EX1 Zudomon, I think this one is very important because this one offers removal, but it also offers buffs to your strategy. So first and foremost, its effect lets you trash one from the bottom of one of your opponent's Digimon, but then when you attack with this Digimon is able to attack unsuspended Digimon with no Digi-Evolution sources. So what it can do is it basically just clears out Digimon that are weaker than it. I think this effect is very powerful. It only really saw play in something like Gabubon, but I think in a deck as the modern version of this deck, if there was a way to give this card some more DP, I think there's a really good possibility that this card could return to action sooner than later. But for right now, this card is one of the better options of Zudomon because it just gives you multiple things it could do. It can do source stripping, but it can also punish your opponent for having hard play stuff. So you can just run them over. And then arguably, I think the best card we have to talk about is Zudomon Ace. I mean, Zudomon Ace is arguably the most perfect Ace Digimon for this type of strategy. Very much so like its presence in Blue Hybrid Ice. The advantage with Zudomon here is that it conjunctionally works with the archetype, so it is searchable by more than just generic sources. You can search this with GOMAMON X, but more importantly, what you want to do with this card is just basically set up your plays. That's also why when you look at Bukamon's effect with BT14 Ikagumon, you understand, because it's like, why would you give it a when attacking effect if it has really low DP? And the point was you were supposed to hopefully have jamming on it with Bukamon's egg, so that when you swing into security with it, it wouldn't die. But unfortunately, because of its restriction, that's a lot harder to pull off. But Zudomon Ace obviously shows why, because if it's suspended, people would run into the Ikagumon to try to get rid of it. This effect allows it to blast Digivolve, obviously, and then you can just remove threats that way. So honestly, very good design, and shows why this deck actually has a very good powerhouse here in Zudomon Ace. But moving into our ultimate, we have Chris Peldramon again from BT5. I really like this specific card because I think generically it just helps this strategy out a lot, because if we're going to focus more on trashing the bottom source of all of your opponent's Digimon is an effect you just can't pass up because of how generic it is, but also how powerful that is, just giving you the ability to get a lot of their Digimon ready to be stunned possibly. But additionally, its security attack +1 and its inheritable effect allows something like Vikemon or Plesiomon to really go nuts at the opponent's security, because they're already stripping sources. This just allows them to get them through the stack just a little bit quicker, right? So it is definitely worth playing. But now I think we're all here for the one reason alone, or two reasons actually, but we're going to be talking about the Big Daddy himself as we go into Vikemon Ace. is Vikemon Ace is the cornerstone of the strategy and is very important when it comes to understanding exactly how the deck is supposed to function. So when we look at Vikemon Ace, what it does is that it kind of puts together a lot of the bad pieces of the deck and kind of makes it as good as it can. Because I think Vikemon Ace, if you really look at it, is an overtuned Ace level 6, but it is designed that way because it has to make up for the strategy it's a part of. And I don't mean that the GOMAMON strategy is bad. I mean that because it has so many random effects, Vikemon Ace has to be able to do so many different things that doesn't matter what type of stack you put it on, it will do something. So looking at Vikemon Ace, obviously the advantage you have here is that if you have to Digivolve it outside of Blast Digivolving this thing, you're able to Digivolve it for 3, so that's already really huge. With trainings, that could be a 1-cost Evo or a memory boost, a 1-cost Evo, so never pass that up. Additionally, it can blast Digivolve, so that's always good. But on player, when Digivolving, you get a D-Digivolve 2 on one of your opponent's Digimon, and then all of their Digimon with 1 or fewer Digi-Evolution cards cannot suspend until the end of the turn, or end of their turn. And this is huge because Vikemon Ace basically stuns everything, roughly, but this D-Digivolve 2 can get something to a point where you can stun it effectively. And I think this is just an effect that's way too good to not understand that the strategy obviously kind of works together with a lot of those stripping and stunning here. So each effect is different, where I think the first effect is obviously a black reference because it's referring to the color that the Digimon has, because D-Digivolve is something you only really see in the color black. But I do think that this uses it very well because it gives it that extra layer of being able to interact with the opponent by D-Digivolving two stages on one of their Digimon, and then by stunning the whole field, it basically allows it to kind of come in and not have to worry about being attacked again if it's, say, suspended, because it had to blast Digivolve on top of something that was suspended. Finally, when attacking, it lets you delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 1 or fewer Digi-Evolution cards. This is huge, but this is huge because this basically means Vikemon will destroy an entire board slowly because it's able to just start getting rid of things you've already source stripped. So it is very powerful and is arguably why it's the cornerstone of the Vikemon or GOMAMON line at this time, because it just allows the deck to take advantage of its really weird effects, but also gives it a top end that isn't going to be run over really quickly and gives it the ability to be safe. So that is the reason why Vikemon Ace is so huge. We don't talk about the other Vikemons because unfortunately they're not that good. They're not bad, but they've become slightly outdated, so I don't even bother mentioning them here. Talking about Plesiomon, because it's finally time to transition to Plesiomon. Plesiomon itself has multiple variants. 2 of them that I'm going to talk about here really quick are the ones that aren't going to really see much synergy with the strategy, that being the EX1 Plesiomon and the Dragon's Roar Plesiomon from EX3. The main reason why both of these don't really see as much play and they don't really synergize well is that EX1's Plesiomon's biggest problem is it does focus on source stripping and can remove your opponent's unsuspended Digimon with no Digi-Evolution cards. The problem with Plesiomon from EX1 is that it is very slow. Like, once you get this into play, if you don't have anything to start stripping the sources to gain that draw 2 that isn't Plesiomon, like with inheritables, you're in a big problem, because then Plesiomon basically doesn't do anything but remove cards by attacking them, and they already have to have no sources. Plesiomon from EX3, though, its main thing is that it's actually not a bad Digimon. The problem is it's just not really designed to have too much synergy with the entire Plesiomon and GOMAMON line. And what I mean by this is, if you really read its effect, it wants to focus more on the aquatic strategy, so you can use more of these level 3 and level 4 sea animal aquatic stuff. So you can use GOMAMON technically. You can play GOMAMON, but the point is Plesiomon as a Dragon's Roar strategy is more focused on like Aegisdramon and using the aquatic cards more than it is actually meant to work with like GOMAMON and Ikakumon, because this deck is focused more on building a big stack and attacking, whereas what the aquatic Plesiomon wants to do is just be a way to continue to flood the field once you get set up. So that's the difference there. Moving into the ones that actually set up the other line of the strategy, we have BT14 Plesiomon alongside the BT15 Plesiomon X. So looking at BT14's Plesiomon, this card's actually very good and it's very simple. So effectively when it Digivolves, you trash 3 sources, but more importantly, when you attack, this card's designed to be more aggressive. If you have your opponent with fewer Digimon with a Digi-Evolution source, this card, it can unsuspend. So this card can effectively make 2 attacks during your opponent's turn. So this has actually been a part of its own strategy for like Plesiomon OTK, because you try to like OTK your opponent, and this stuff combined with like Chris Paledramon from BT5 allows the deck to do that pretty well. Moving into something like Plesioman X, this card is more focused on being able to bounce cards through having less sources than it, but more importantly, it gains memory when your opponent attacks, and if they control or if you have Plesioman or X anybody in the sources of Plesioman X, you gain 2 memory, so it allows you to try to steal turns, but more importantly, put your opponent on a clock, because this card ability to just do that is annoying, and you can just kind of let it sit there, and it could just simply do that. If you give your opponent very few memory, like say you give them 1 memory and that's all they can work with, this card can just sit on the board, and every time they attack, you just pass it back over. So this card is just solid for that, and it closes out the other branch plus of the Gomamon line, where this is the main top end you want to focus on instead of like Vikemon. So moving into Tamers, I do want to talk about Tamers very briefly because it's important, but simultaneously, this is where the deck needs some building. So starting off, we're running the BT14 Joe. You'd be wanting to run Sora and Joe from BT5, and you obviously want to play some type of memory setter. I just have Davis here because this deck doesn't have a lot of searching power in its actual archetype, so you maybe want to play this. Joe's main goal is that in combination with BT14 Gomamon, this card is very strong because once you push out Gomamon from the raising with this card, if you strip sources, you can gain memory back immediately, so it will always proc Joe, and then it's just pretty solid that way, and it can self-proc itself if you have an opponent's board that's already set up. Moving into Sora and Joe, this card's been a staple for strategies like this ever since its inception. Because of it being able to gain 2 memory, your opponent is less likely to play wide, but they might have to. But also it takes advantage of forcing your opponent. If they do play wide, you can strip their sources. And also with the Gomamon line variants, you're able to stun their Digimon. So if you're able to strip 2, you can just immediately stun it. So then it's like, oh, well, too bad, even if they Digivolve on top. So this card's very good for that. Additionally, we have Davis because, like I said, the deck needs searching, and I am really reluctant to try to play anything else because without 4 Bukomon, the deck is very susceptible to losing security battles, so you don't want to do that. Looking into something like both of them, you really understand the combination with Joe, because I think having Joe Tamers is important because you'll see an option later on that really does have synergy well with the strategy, so you do need a Tamer with Joe in play. So you do run these because I just think they give you the best chance of trying to get your strategy up and running. Additionally, Davis, like I said, this card being able to search has been a mainstay since its inception because it just gives all these blue decks that don't have good ways to search an ability to have another way to grab cards. And I think in Plesioman or Gomamon, this card just allows you to get the pieces you need, so never rule it out. Additionally, when we look at substitute Tamers, the only other ones I could really think is maybe Kyoshiro, but my problem with Kyoshiro is that I think that if you don't have jamming, its effect isn't as viable. You really have to be in like Vikemon maybe or Plesiomon to try to go for the big effect of it by allowing you to draw a card when you have 7 or fewer. You really have to think about that because I would be honest, don't risk your Digimon in a stack unless you're guaranteed you won't die, because with Ace Digimon especially, this is something you don't want to do, but you can risk it for the biscuit, so to speak. For the generic searching and options, obviously Blue Memory Boost and Mental Training are must-haves in this deck, more so than it's something like the last basic breakdown on Blue Hybrid Ice. This deck sorely needs it because it has no access to generic searching in its own archetype except for Gomamon X. So you need to play as much searching as possible to kind of fix the problem of this deck. But I do think this is a fun deck, but you can use these as well. Then moving into the other 2 options that you could play, we have Wave of Reliability. I think this card was obviously going to make its return, but it makes its return here because in theme you have a Tamer with Joe Keto. You're able to unsuspend one of your Digimon. So in combination with Wave of Reliability, Plesiomon from BT14, the possibility of jamming security attack +1 from like Chris Peltramon, and this card, you could in theory take out all your opponent's security with 1 swing, or like 3 swings technically, but this card allows you to unsuspend. So if for whatever reason they gain blocker in this deck, you're now able to take care of that, but also it can let you unsuspend something like your Zudomon Ace so it can't be attacked. So those are just options for you to think about, as well as your Zudomon Ace. Looking at the other option too, we have Forbidden Trident. I think this card's fantastic because what it does is it gives 2000 DP to your Digimon, and they gain the 1 attacking effect to return one of your opponent's level 3 Digimon to its owner's hand. The main focus you want to do with Forbidden Trident is that if you boost up something a little bit more, you run the risk of that security battle working in your favor, but more importantly, you get to bounce Floodgate rookies. So in this deck, the most annoying thing is Digimon that stop you from gaining memory except by Tamer effects. So by running this in your deck, you can make like a Ikakumon or a Zudomon or Plesiomon or something to be able to bounce cards back, so your opponent really can't do anything about that, and you'll gain that memory from the trashing effects. So it is a way to go. And then finally, the last option I have is Howling Memory Boost. I think this card is just sorely underrated, but in this deck you kind of need to run it as well. Like I said before, with something like Blue Hybrid Ice, this deck functions extremely well on using these different types of generic cards to its max advantage, and by stripping sources and stunning a Digimon, it just makes it easier for your deck to kind of come in. So instead of having to worry about Digivolving up, you just go, okay, Howling, and then go for 3, go ahead and strip the sources of something, and then now it's stunned. So it's just one less thing you have to worry about, and you can always trade in your boosts later on, so this is always important. This is all the cards, but we're going to be going into the most important factor that I'm going to be doing now with Basic Breakdown, is what do we do for the future. So if you're looking at this now or later on, this is an important role to kind of talk about what maybe the deck needs, or if it exists now when you're watching later on, that, oh, this is exactly what maybe they need. So starting off, what the deck needs, it obviously needs more search power. I think another GOMAMON that searches would be fantastic, or even like a Ikakumon that could Digivolve on top of GOMAMON that helps it search. Very good. The deck definitely needs more searching power, whether it's an option or another Digimon to do it. I think that's important. Additionally, they need to solidify the strategies. So for Vikemon, the problem I have with Vikemon is that it's sort of like a control deck. It's supposed to be like you use all the effects to trash sources, you stun Digimon, and then when you go into Vikemon Ace is supposed to start clearing away your opponent's board. So technically it's a control deck, but it really needs to solidify its strategy with a little bit more. I think maybe protection effects are in order for this deck, or some more source stripping, because I think the deck really does need more stripping to get rid of sources, because it just doesn't do it as well as it could. Other decks do it a little bit more quickly. So yeah, I think this deck would definitely benefit from that. And then also for Plesiomon too, if Plesiomon's going to be its own deck and it already kind of has the shell, add more cards to support specifically Plesiomon, because that would be really cool. Additionally, more support that works for both strategies is kind of the key. So as long as they create kind of a GOMAMON searcher or some type of searcher that does exactly what GOMAMON X does, I think it's fantastic, because it works for both strategies. They don't need to print more than the cards that they need to, but it would definitely be a beneficial tool to help. And then finally, we have just another Vikemon. I think that the Vikemon part of the actual GOMAMON line is definitely severely lacking. So if they make more supports for specifically Vikemon, or specifically another Vikemon, this would already fix a lot of the issues I talked about today. And hopefully it's decent, because like I said, they just need another Vikemon, because people who try to play Vikemon decks, it's pretty much you always have to supplement something else on the top end. And I do think that by making another Vikemon for the strategy, they could take advantage of that instead of having to make you use something else. But that's all I've got for you guys today, as that has been the basic breakdown for Vikemon and the GOMAMON and Plesiomon lines, and I do hope this helps you out in understanding the strategy. But like I say before, let me know down in the comments below what you like about this type of video, but more importantly, what do you think you should be doing with the Vikemon, Plesiomon, and GOMAMON lines? Are you excited for future support for these decks? And more importantly, I hope this did help you out. And as always, this has been Brad from the Ed Army signing off. And for all of you out there, to sign on.